Before we venture into the chilling tale of the cursed night of Blackwood, make sure you're ready. Hit that like button to light your way through the darkness, and subscribe so you never miss another tale from the shadows. Brace yourself. This story is not for the faint of heart. Let's begin. Part 1. Whispers of the Forest. There was something wrong with Blackwood Forest. The townsfolk had spoken in hushed tones about the witch who was said to haunt its heart. They called her Mother Celine, though none knew where she came from or how she came to claim the forest as her own. Stories varied, but they agreed on one thing. Once night fell, no soul was safe within the dark, tangled branches of Blackwood. One rainy October evening, 3 friends, Evan, Claire, and Marcus, dared each other to enter Blackwood after sunset. They were locals who'd heard all the stories growing up, and though they would never have admitted it, a sliver of fear twisted in their hearts. Evan shivered as they walked along the forest's edge. "Why are we doing this again? It's ridiculous." Marcus, always the bravest, or the foolhardiest, laughed. To prove that Mother Celine is nothing more than a myth, a scary bedtime story for little kids. Claire frowned. "I don't know. My grandmother used to tell me about people disappearing in Blackwood. She believed in the curse." "Are we children?" Marcus scoffed. "There's nothing to fear but our own minds." As they stepped into the forest, the air thickened with a damp chill that settled on their skin, sending shivers down their spines. Above, the last sliver of daylight was swallowed by clouds, plunging the forest into pitch darkness. Part 2. The Call of the Witch. They walked deeper into Blackwood, barely able to see the path before them. Evan pulled out his flashlight, its pale beam cutting through the oppressive darkness. Shadows danced around them, creating shapes that seemed to shift and writhe at the edge of their vision. "Did you hear that?" Claire whispered, clutching her arms as if to ward off an unseen chill. A low, whispering voice echoed around them, soft at first but growing louder. It was a woman's voice, hoarse and cold. "Turn back, leave, while you can." The voice sent a shock of terror through them, stopping them in their tracks. What was that? Evan's voice trembled, barely audible. Marcus forced a grin, though it looked strained. "Just the wind, nothing more." But Claire was shaking her head, her face pale. "No, that wasn't the wind. That was her. I'm sure of it. We need to leave." A laugh echoed from deeper within the trees, a cold, sinister laugh that cut through the silence like a blade. A woman's voice called, sharp as broken glass. "You came seeking me, did you not? Do not be so quick to turn away." They exchanged terrified glances, and Marcus swallowed hard, his bravado wavering. "It's someone trying to scare us. Just ignore it." But then, they saw her. A figure stood a few feet ahead, cloaked in shadows. Her face was hidden beneath a hood, her form twisted and unnatural. Pale, bony fingers reached from beneath the fabric, beckoning them closer. Her voice slithered through the darkness, piercing their minds. "Come closer, children. I have been waiting for you." Evan felt his legs turn to lead, unable to move forward or back. Who are you?" The woman let out a low chuckle. "I am Mother Celine, the one you seek, and the one you shall never escape." Part 3. The Bargain. Marcus, trying to mask his fear, called out, "You don't scare us. You're just a trick of the shadows, a myth." The figure's hood tilted toward him, and a low hiss escaped her. "Ah, a brave one. Or perhaps a fool. Tell me, little one, do you know what happens to those who mock me?" Marcus swallowed, his voice faltering. What do you want?" She laughed again, a sound like nails on a chalkboard. "I want your souls, of course, but I'm not without mercy. I will give you a choice." Claire's eyes were wide with terror. "What choice?" The witch raised a hand, her fingers twisting in the air. Mist began to swirl around them, thick and cloying, filling their lungs and chilling their bones. Her voice was a soft whisper, yet it rang in their minds like a bell. "Run," she said, a dark smile spreading across her face. "If you can escape my forest before midnight, I shall spare you. But if you fail..." She trailed off, leaving the threat hanging in the air. Then she raised her hand, and the forest exploded with sound. Screams, laughter, cries of pain. The trees seemed to move, their branches clawing toward the three friends, trapping them in a web of darkness. Evan's voice was barely a whisper. "Run!" And they did. They sprinted through the forest, the witch's laughter chasing them, twisting through the trees, growing louder with every step. Part 4. The Forest of Shadows. The deeper they ran, the more disoriented they became. Trees twisted and turned in unnatural ways, paths looping back on themselves, leading them in circles. Their breaths came in ragged gasps, their hearts pounding with terror. "Are we going in circles?" Claire's voice was filled with panic. "Yes," Evan said, trying to catch his breath. "It's like the forest is alive." A voice echoed from behind them, a taunting sing-song. "You cannot escape, little lambs. The forest is mine." They could see her now, drifting between the trees, her form half hidden in shadow. She moved like smoke, gliding silently, her face twisted in a cruel smile. Her eyes were empty voids, darker than the night, drawing them in with a terrible pull. "You cannot run forever," she whispered. "Your souls belong to me." Marcus was the first to stumble, falling to his knees. I can't keep running." "Get up!" Claire screamed, trying to pull him to his feet. But it was too late. The witch was there, towering over them, her empty eyes fixed on Marcus. She leaned down, her face inches from his, her breath freezing the air. "You thought you could mock me, did you?" she hissed, her voice dripping with malice. "Now, you shall see what happens to those who defy me." Her hand shot out, gripping Marcus's arm with unnatural strength. He screamed as the flesh began to wither beneath her touch, his skin turning gray and brittle, his life force draining away. "Please," Claire sobbed, clutching at Evan. "We have to do something." But there was nothing they could do. The witch's laughter filled the air as Marcus's screams grew weaker, until finally, he fell silent, his body crumbling into ash. Evan and Claire stumbled backward, tears streaming down their faces, paralyzed with horror. The witch turned her gaze to them, a cruel smile twisting her lips. "Run," she whispered, her voice filled with dark amusement. "Or you shall join him." Part 5. The Final Hour. Evan and Claire ran, their footsteps echoing in the silence. The witch's laughter followed them, growing louder and louder, filling the air with a sound that chilled their bones. They could feel her presence behind them, always one step ahead, her dark magic twisting the forest around them. "Evan, what are we going to do?" Claire's voice was barely audible, filled with despair. Evan swallowed hard, fighting the terror that gripped his heart. "We have to keep moving. We can't let her win." But as the minutes ticked by, hope began to fade. The trees closed in around them, their branches like skeletal fingers, reaching out to trap them. The witch's laughter grew louder, closer, until it felt like she was breathing down their necks. Finally, they stumbled into a small clearing, the moonlight filtering through the trees. They collapsed to the ground, gasping for breath, their bodies numb with exhaustion. "It's no use," Claire whispered, tears streaming down her face. "We're never going to get out of here." Evan took her hand, his grip firm. "We can't give up. We have to keep fighting, for Marcus." But even as he spoke, the air grew cold, and the shadows deepened. The witch stepped into the clearing, her eyes gleaming with cruel amusement. "Is this how it ends?" she mocked, her voice dripping with disdain. Two little lambs, huddling together in the dark? They scrambled to their feet, but there was nowhere to run. The witch raised her hand and the ground began to tremble, the trees bending toward them, their branches twisting like claws. "Your souls belong to me," she whispered, her voice filled with dark hunger. "And there is no escape." Claire closed her eyes, her voice barely a whisper. "Please, let us go." But the witch only laughed, a sound that echoed through the forest, filling the air with a darkness that swallowed all hope. Then, in a final act of desperation, Evan raised his voice, shouting into the night, "You don't have to do this! There must be some way to end this curse!" The witch paused, her eyes narrowing as she regarded him. For a moment, silence hung in the air, thick with tension. Then she spoke, her voice low and dangerous. "There is one way," she said, a dark smile spreading across her face. "But it comes with a price." "What price?" Evan asked, his voice trembling. She tilted her head, her empty eyes fixed on him. "One of you must stay with me, forever." Evan felt his heart sink, his mind reeling. He looked at Claire, and she looked back at him, her face filled with fear and sorrow. Finally he nodded. "I'll stay, let her go." The witch's smile widened, and she reached out, her hand hovering over his heart. "So brave. So noble. Very well. Your soul is mine." As her hand touched his chest, a terrible coldness spread through him, filling him with darkness. He could feel his life slipping away, his very essence drawn into her grasp. But as the world faded around him, he saw Claire's face one last time, her eyes filled with tears. And then, darkness. Claire stumbled out of Blackwood, the witch's laughter echoing in her mind, a sound that would haunt her forever. She had escaped, but the price had been steep. The townsfolk would speak of that night for years to come, whispering of the boy who had given his soul to the witch and the girl who had been spared. And deep within Blackwood, Mother Celine waited, her eyes gleaming with dark hunger, knowing that someday she would claim another soul.